In an age of distraction, we would rather tap on our iPhones than stop a war from happening. It's heartbreaking, Satan's patiently waiting for us to mess up big time, so hell on earth will be blatant. But I've got a change of heart, it's time for change now. Rearrange now, for the world it could be equal. You could be the start of the beginning. A dawn of no stress, no troubles, no sinning, just living. So overthrow evil and greed, put aside your distractions. Welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me, welcome change with me. Now welcome change with me, now welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me.
Alright everybody, welcome back to Rockin' the Butt Reactions, and this is Gretchen. I'm going to do chapter 6 of REN's chapters. It had been a few days since I had done his other, so we're ready to go. Let's get going on chapter 6.
I'm going to try and hold it together throughout this one.
That means I gotta try to hold it together.
2015 was the worst year of my life. At the end of 2014, I attended a private UK-based ME specialist clinic called Breakspear. For some reason, the treatments had sent my health nosediving, and I became more sick than I'd ever been. I became so weak that I couldn't walk to the bathroom without needing to lie on the floor to recover. I couldn't focus on anything. I couldn't read. I couldn't watch TV. All I could do there was lie there in pain. It was obvious during this time that I needed to move back home with my mum again. She moved to Cardiff with a new husband, and they had a spare room, which became my tomb for the next 8 months. At this point, I was so weak that the most that I could manage to do a day was to take a shower. The rest of the time I was confined to my bed. I started reacting even more severely to foods, so every single meal had to be blended into soups or broths to avoid negative reactions. Pain constantly shot through my shin bones and through my feet, like splinters. My stomach would gurgle, and the muscles in my body would constantly twitch, spasm and ache. My body felt drained of every single ounce of life, and I was so tired, but I was too wired to sleep. I was so full of mental fog that reading a single page on a book seemed impossible. The daylight coming in from behind the curtain hurt my eyes. Loud sounds felt overwhelming. All I could do was wait and pray for sleep, knowing that when I woke from it, nothing would change. I wouldn't feel in any way rested, and all the symptoms would persist. This went on and on and on. It was day after day of physical and mental torture. I thought of concentration camps, of prisoners of war being tortured. At least the escape of death seemed likely. During that time I never got breaks. My whole body burned, my brain was on fire, and I had nowhere to hide. In the merciful moments where I could concentrate, I tenaciously trawled the internet, looking for ways out. My research drew me to a procedure called a fecal transplant that was having success managing things like Crohn's disease or colitis. It had also gained success in some select cases of autoimmune conditions like MS too. At the time, I felt like much of my issues were caused by dysbiosis, which means an imbalance in your gut flora. I noticed that all the food intolerances started after a large course of antibiotics for the parasite. I wondered if the parasite had wreaked havoc on my microbiome before I nuked it with antibiotics that worsened it further. Fecal transplants can introduce a whole host of probiotic bacteria into your gut, and it can re-establish a healthy homeostasis. In normal person speak, I wanted to pay to put another person's poop in my butthole. I carried on filming videos from my bed, blogging my experience. I was pretty convinced that during this time I wouldn't be alive much longer, and part of me wanted there to be some kind of document of what I'd been through in hopes that it might help someone later down the line.
And if this illness does kill me, then I want this video. I want somebody who can take notice of this video and do something with it.
I had a fundraiser open to save money for the fecal transplant, which was very slowly creeping up. I needed to save $6,000 in total. I remember my girlfriend wanting to come and visit, but telling her that I didn't want her to. There are a few reasons for this. One, I was pretty sure I was going to die soon. The day before Joe died, I'd been sat with him at a pub, catching up, playing pool, cracking jokes. I'd often wondered if I'd have been hit less hard by his death if I'd been away at university when it happened. For my girlfriend's sake, I wanted her to have distance from me. I also felt ugly. I felt unlovable. I was unable to communicate, and I didn't want her to see me like that. I watched my mum look thinner and more frail every day that she had to watch her son deteriorate, and I felt immense guilt. My mum would often walk in and find me either crying on the bathroom or kitchen floor, having no energy to get back into bed. She'd often sit with me and massage my feet, which always hurt, and she'd hum melodies to me like she would do when I was a little boy. During this whole time, I hadn't picked up my guitar. I barely had any sunlight touch my skin, and I lost a lot of weight. I was about 130 pounds at my lowest, about 8 or 9 stone, which for someone who is 6'1" is very skinny. My average weight is usually about 168 pounds, 12 stone. Every day the same thing. I'd wake up in pain, eat a meal of blended vegetables and chicken, lie with my eyes closed for hours while the world seemed to spin erratically, and I'd often cry as the bones of my legs felt like they wanted to grow out and burst out of my skin. Despite this, what I didn't know is things were about to get a lot worse. Come June, I've been in bed for about 6 months straight. I've regained some energy to leave the house every now and then to go shopping for groceries with my mum, and I've finally reached my target for the fecal transplant, and my mum drove me to the clinic to get the procedure. Everything seemed to go as smoothly as it could for such a bizarre experience. I received a colonic irrigation, which was like a car wash for your colon. Actually feels pretty good. They then proceeded to put someone else's excrement in my behind. They would repeat this process for 5 consecutive days. When I got home...
I'm going to pause that there for a second, because as an internal medicine doctor, I've actually had to order people to get fecal transplants because it's actually a very good and effective treatment for people who have C. diff, recurrent C. diff infections, and C. diff being a antibiotic resistant bacteria that's in the intestine that can be very difficult to treat, easy to catch. You can treat it, get it again, and so transplanting a normal person's feces into a patient who has C. diff is actually effective treatment. So I've actually been involved in the doctor side of that procedure before, not as a patient, but as a doctor. Anyway,
I realised I felt a little odd, almost manic, and I was hopeful that this meant my energy was coming back. But it wasn't a nice feeling. As the days progressed, I started to feel an innate sense that something was very wrong. It seemed my immune system was going into some sort of overdrive. My brain was buzzing, and the more time that passed, the more uncomfortable I felt.
I'm going to pause it right there. 6:32. So there's a potential complication. It's rare, but there's a potential complication in certain people with the fecal transplants because you are introducing someone else's bacteria, any viral particles that they may have in their stool, because you can't irradiate it. You can't clean it of any bugs because you need the bugs. You need the good bacteria, and so whatever is also in the fecal matter that you're transplanting into the person for treatment, they can ultimately then have a reaction or a response to whatever else is in that fecal transplant matter. So if you have someone who has some kind of a virus particles that, while the person where the feces came from may not have had any problems with it, you may have someone who's more susceptible, who has an autoimmune disorder or whatever the case may be here. I'm just saying autoimmune disorder because it's just right in front of our face here with REN. But if you have any kind of immune deficiency, then you're probably going to have a stronger reaction to whatever other bacteria, viruses, whatever may be in the donor feces. And so I should probably give this a chance to go along with his story, but just throwing that out there, that this is immediately kind of sounding like that he might be having, because he is a sensitive system with his autoimmunity and the whatever all is going on with him at this point. We're not even really sure, I don't think. And bless his heart, man, I wish if we could go back in a time machine, I would go back and I would be his doctor, because I would do everything in my power to get this young man diagnosed and treated, because I feel like he was so abandoned. And and it's okay to go outside of the normal medicine realm as a doctor. You can research homeopathic remedies and alternative medicine stuff. It's okay as a doctor to do that, especially when traditional medicine isn't working. And this is the Ren's case. Ren is a perfect example of someone who, the system just failed him on so many levels. And I just can't help but feel like, if I just had him under my wing, I would have really done absolutely every single thing that I could have done for him. And I'm not like trying to be grandiose or tooting my own horn or anything like that. That's just how I practiced medicine, was like, I never gave up. I never gave in. I followed up and did everything in my power. And I just feel like he was missing that in his medical team. Hope I don't get crucified for saying that. I hope people don't be like, this is all about you. No, it's not all about me. I'm just trying, anyway. All right. Okay, carrying on.
I remember early one morning, I was lying on the kitchen floor after attempting to get a glass of water. My body hurt so much that I was digging my nails into the laminate flooring, screaming, and my mum ran in and asked me what was wrong. I remember repeating, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, I don't want to go, over and over again. I felt myself falling down a deep tunnel in my mind, almost as though my entire soul was tumbling down into an abyss. When I finally crashed to the bottom, I was hit with this immense feeling of stillness and peace. I stopped crying, I sat up, and my mother looked at me, puzzled. I have not felt to this day that sort of serenity that I felt in that moment. I looked around the room and everything seemed to have gained a clarity and quality. But what was most peculiar was the feeling of stillness. There seemed to be some sort of respite from the mental torture and fog in my brain. I still to this day have no explanation for what happened. I looked at my mum, I smiled at her calmly, and I told her that everything was okay now. Her partner Michael came in, and I remember them both looking at me, perplexed. I started speaking fluidly for the first time in months, but it wasn't quite me. I was cracking jokes, being witty. My mum would laugh nervously. I remember feeling as though I was coming up off an ecstasy pill. I felt this underlying feeling of euphoria. I caught myself occasionally erratically snapping my fingers or making whistling noises in between sentences, or staring at some empty part of the room as though there was somebody there, then snapping back to the space and talking to my mum.
What this is almost reminding me of is a near-death experience where people, so if you have someone, if you've ever been involved in end of life with a family member or a friend or anyone on a caregiving level, like sometimes right before death, within hours, the person might like wake up and have a conversation, and when they've been basically comatose for days and they haven't had anything to eat or drink, palliative care. And so sometimes you can have an experience just near death. Again, the person might wake up, have a full conversation, seem completely normal, and it's very alarming to the family members, the loved ones, because it's, if you're not forewarned that can be a normal part of the death experience, then you might think, oh wait, what are we doing? This is, they're going to be okay. This is wrong. We shouldn't be withholding food and liquids, and we should be doing everything, when in fact it's a like a pre-death euphoria type of a experience, and a complete being completely lucid. And this, while he's talking here, it's kind of almost making me think of that. I know he was really, really sick, but I don't know if he was like, if it was that type of a thing or not. I don't know. Anyway, carrying on, let's see where this goes.
This feeling of intense euphoria lasted about 48 hours. During this time, I'd adopted some newer strange behaviours. Everything in my room that wasn't parallel bothered me, so I had to make sure it was aligned and facing the same direction. The whistle and the finger click became a new tick, and it started rising in frequency the more time that elapsed. I also noticed that I get stuck on words or sentences when talking to my mum. For example, if I was saying a sentence like, "I'm not sure how I'm feeling today," I would sometimes get stuck on the whole sentence or just a word from it and repeat it about 30 or 40 times before I could move on to the next. So I'm not sure how I'm feeling today, feeling today, over and over. I can't really explain why, but it's like saying it carved out a safe space for me. After about 2 days, that feeling of peace and euphoria was swapped out for a feeling of immense dread and doom. I felt fear fill my body, unlike any fear that I've ever felt. I'd often wake up in the early hours of the morning screaming at the top of my lungs, a torture scream that would fill the whole house, a scream like my legs were being sawn off. I felt pure terror. My mum would run in and try and calm me down. Sometimes I'd be thrashing, hitting the mattress, pounding the walls. It usually ended up in me exhausting myself and her stroking my head in her lap as I sobbed and repeated the same words over and over again. Everything in these moments terrified me. The compulsion to make everything parallel became a necessity. Whenever I was in the kitchen or car and the dials were facing the wrong way, it taunted me. My mum started taking me to a weekly talk therapist in hopes it would stop me from killing myself. I did catch myself researching the most painless ways to do it. I often daydreamed about death, and it made me feel at peace. At this point, intense paranoid delusions started creeping in. I wondered if what was happening to me was demonic. I don't remember how I got there, but I remember one time speaking on the landline to someone who claimed to be an expert in dark magic. He told me that being around my mum was bad for me. He told me that she was bad. He told me that I needed to do a ritual with black wax candles in order to free myself. I remember ordering black candles from eBay, and when they arrived I had a change of heart, and I decided against doing this dark magic ritual. I fell asleep that night, and I woke up the next day to find the candles totally melted onto the white mantelpiece that they were on. They'd never been lit. I still don't really know for certain if anything of these things happened, but the melted wax was definitely real. I remember picking it off with my nails. There were moments that my rational mind knew that I was hallucinating. Sometimes in the night I would hear perfect string quartet symphonies with no sound source for them to be coming from. I remember one time my mum took me with her to the post office because during this time I'd rarely been left in the house alone. I remember the lady behind the till reaching for some sellotape. As she tugged on the tape, it sounded as though it had been amplified 1,000 times. It was deafeningly loud. I ran out of the store crying and shaking, and I sat in the passenger seat of my mum's car, rocking back and forth, where she found me uncontrollably sobbing, repeating the words, I can't, over and over again. My paranoia grew. I boomeranged between thinking I may have been latched onto by some demonic entity, and I became suspicious of even my own family, to thinking I might be part of some sort of twisted experiment, where a group of observers were seeing how far they could push me before I snapped and shattered. My irrational mind concluded that if I start behaving in unexpected ways, I might confuse the people conducting this experiment, and they'd shut it down. I'd sit in my own bed manically grinning in response to the jolt of pain in my legs. I'd say things to Mum and Michael which made no sense at all. This all seemed to be leading up to a very unusual day. I can't quite recall the details of how it happened because it was quite tricky to tell what was reality and what was not. But from what I remember, I was in the car with my mum, parked outside a supermarket, and I'd put my laptop on the roof of the car while I'd helped her with groceries. I'd forgotten it was there and she drove off. It wasn't until about an hour later I noticed and I started panicking. My laptop had on it hundreds of songs from my time in Brighton. It was all I had really to show for my life. I was already in such an emotionally fragile space that losing that felt like some sick, torturous joke. We drove back and searched every place it could be with no luck. As we were driving home, my mum pulled up at a junction and something in me snapped. I got out of the car and I ran away from it. I convinced myself this was still part of the experiment, because what else could explain that sort of luck? Once I got far enough away, I proceeded to strip off all my clothes and I lay in the middle of a road staring up at the sky, laughing in hysterics. This was the opposite of how one should react to losing their computer, and so it seemed like the perfect way to confuse my observers. With time, the police showed up, as did my mother. By some miracle, she convinced them not to take me in or section me, and by a further miracle, they also relayed to my mum that a dented laptop had been handed in an hour earlier. I took this as meaning my experiment had worked. I eventually snuck off as my mum was talking to them. I wandered slowly around this unfamiliar village until I encountered the second angel I would meet in my life, this time in the form of a black homeless man. I'm not sure how we got there, but as I was walking, I turned to my side and a man dressed in tattered grey clothes was walking beside me. He asked me what was wrong, and I explained the best I could the events of the day. I explained that I'd been sick a very long time, that I was tired, so tired, and that I just wanted to be better. The homeless man paused. He put his hand on my shoulders and he stared into my eyes. His eyes had a light grey tint. They were almost white, and something about his presence made me feel incredibly safe, incredibly still. He smiled, a kind smile, and he said to me, "Everything's going to be okay, Ren." And then he vanished. I hadn't told him my name. I never hallucinated anything after that day. I have no real explanation for that day. I chalk it down to a psychotic episode or stress-induced hallucination, but the events which follow put a lot of questions in my mind. What he said to me was very simple, but also very needed. I realise a lot of people might hear these stories and just presume I'm a bit mad, a bit weird, like I do when people tell me their ghost stories. All I can do is tell you my experience and let you derive your own conclusions from it. Anyway, I got home and I started to obsessively research ways to escape this new seemingly psychotic space I was in. It's a strange thing to describe, but it was like me, Ren, was in the passenger seat of my mind while some other entity was steering the ship. I was watching myself do things like scream at night or repeat words over and over, and I think to myself, damn, that's pretty crazy. But I wouldn't be able to do anything about it. Every now and then I had moments of lucidity where I was more in control. I was doing things like stimming. I had night terrors, vocal tics, I'd stutter and I'd stammer. And for me, a lot of that lined up with some sort of transitory or stress-induced autism. I'd known a family with an autistic teenager and some of the behaviour seemed to line up, which led me to a new pathway of online research. I came across this support group for a subset of children with autism called PANDAS, PANDAS. It was believed that these kids had the neurological infection of the streptococcus bacteria that was causing these autistic-like behaviours. I was presenting with some similar behaviours. These kids would do long courses of antibiotics and their symptoms would diminish or disappear and they'd be seemingly normal children again. I speculated that the fecal transplant introduced a whole host of new bacteria into my gut, but that I didn't have the immune regulation to be able to control it, and it had sent my entire system into some sort of inflammation overdrive. I researched the most effective antibiotic for streptococcus, one being penicillin, and I convinced my mum to take me to the doctor, where I faked a stomach bug. I lied to him, and I said I'd had similar things in the past, and the penicillin cleared it right up. He reluctantly prescribed me a 2-week course of antibiotics because I was so persistent. I got home and I started the course. Initially I felt fucking awful, somehow even more tired than usual, and then towards the end of the course I noticed a definite shift in my energy and comfort. By the end of the course, my psychotic behaviours had disappeared and my energy felt a lot better. I stayed indefinitely on various herbal antibiotic supplements like oregano oil at this time, having learned that this was also active against certain pathogenic bacteria. Keep in mind also, I'm just going off script right now, keep in mind if I'd have followed the advice of most of the doctors that I'd seen at the time who were talking to me about my psychotic behaviours, I would have probably been put into a mental facility and medicated with medication that I didn't need, and would have probably gotten a lot worse. So it was very...
Boy, and he's right, too, because, first of all, when you go on an antibiotic for any kind of infection, as you may know if you've experienced this, if you have an infection, you get started on antibiotic, the first 12 to 24 hours, you're going to get worse before you get better. And that's because the antibiotic is working to start killing off the bacteria, and then the bacteria are releasing all the different inflammatory markers that they have that then ramps up your immune system, that then might spike your fever. It might make you just have more myalgias or arthralgias, and just in general, you're going to feel a lot worse. And so in his case, I mean, if he was never tested for this, and if he did indeed have a streptococcus infection, and who knows how long he could have had it, and yes, it could have been in the bacteria with the fecal transplant, and I missed how far between these things were, but if he had had it for a while and it was really wreaking havoc in his system, and his body was in overdrive responding to this new bacteria, and which would cause the psychotic stuff potentially, and the heightened senses, the hearing, the just the spatial awareness, and all of that stuff can all be heightened and enhanced dramatically from an immune response with inflammatory markers. And it's interesting though, because I missed, I guess, how many days it took him before he started to feel better, but he said that he had gotten a couple weeks course of the antibiotic from the doctor. And isn't it just shameful that he had to come up with a story to get a doctor to prescribe him something? I mean, it's shameful. Not on him. It's shameful on the medical community. I mean, it embarrasses me as a member of the medical community for him to have gone to these measures to get himself some help. It's just so unnecessary. It's unnecessary pain and suffering and lack of support. I mean, the lack of support. And he's right. If he would have gone on and done what they recommended, yeah, he probably would have been on all kinds of medications that were going to make him worse, put him in a mental facility, which would not have helped him. He would have been going into a padded room probably because of how much pain he was in, and the way that his mom and her husband took care of him. You wouldn't find that in a mental facility. If that would have been the case, they would have thought that he was losing his mind. And so, I mean, it's amazing that he has such strength and such fortitude, and he has such a depth of character is ultimately what it is. It's a depth of character that not many of us would be able to endure. And man, but really, it's not unusual that he would feel a lot worse before he started feeling better after getting that penicillin, and then have the 180 or the flip the switch, and all of a sudden you start feeling better. So all right, let's keep going.
Lucky that I took no one tells you that antibiotics can treat psychosis, and these antibiotics did actually treat my psychosis. And I was no stranger to the placebo effect. I'd taken everything, it wasn't placebo. It didn't matter. After about a week, I'd finished the course, and some of my more familiar symptoms like fatigue and pain started creeping back again. But that didn't matter, because what this whole experience had taught me was that the origin of my sickness was in fact bacterial, and it was pathogenic. The biggest thing it taught me was I could actually do something about it. I was no stranger to the placebo effect after years of trialling different drugs and supplements. This wasn't placebo. I took to the internet again and found a world-renowned specialist over in Brussels who was also leading a lot of the cutting-edge research for ME. I got on the phone and made an appointment. He was booked up for the next 9 months, but that gave me enough time to save money. The antibiotics and new herbs I was taking had also given me a new lease of life, and the hope for a cure made me more determined than ever. I started having enough energy to go on walks, which was huge for me at the time. My dad would drive over to my mum's and we'd go out in the car, and I'd take photos of wildlife on beaches. I was picking up my guitar again after months in bed. I eventually invited my girlfriend over and made the decision to move back to Brighton as soon as I was strong enough to. It was around this time that I started working on the album Freckled Angels. I knew that the future tests weren't going to be cheap. I pulled together some old tracks from the days I was working with Sony, and I got hold of Eric and asked his permission to release them, which he graciously granted, so thank you, Eric. I then pulled together some newer material and compiled my first ever album from my bedroom. In those days, I had no real way of promoting myself and no energy to do shows, so it was mostly to be listened to by my friends and family. I named the album Freckled Angels after Joe. Joe was covered head to toe in freckles, and it seemed fitting to dedicate this work to one of the coolest and funniest people I ever knew. Any ounce of energy I did have from my limited reserves, I'd pour into recording that album. It's by no means a work of art, and it's a bit thematically disjointed, but some songs like Crutch or Pocketful of Pain went a long way to photographing that time. I'm gonna leave you with a recording of Pocketful of Pain. Back in those days. Enjoy. Cool. Da 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 da. Yeah, 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 yeah. I watch the sun when it rises, when it's climbing the sky. I sit here with the pocket full of pain. I've got tears in my juice, in my mind. There's a noose, but my hope makes me cling to the day. I wanna run with the sun and the moon and the stars till I'm running faster than my pain. I wish I could breathe out this fear, this doubt, send it into the Milky Way. I got my finger on the trigger of a Magnum 44, but survival instinct won't let me bleed. I wanna put a bullet straight in my cerebral tissues place, but my index finger won't let me squeeze. I wanna skate down my vein with the blade till the blood runs thicker than the thoughts in my head. But don't ask me why, this is not my goodbye, it's a suicide failure attempt. Dum, 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 dum. I choose life, I choose life, I choose living. Put the bottles and the pills down, I stand up, I breathe with precision. Calm washes over me like a break in the storm. I close my eyes for a minute, then my troubles transform, and I travel deep into the corners of my mind. I remember the first time I felt hopeless. I think I was 5, cause at the hands of this bully, the lessons that I learned is that this world is not so beautiful. Sometimes it can be burnt by the fires of evil that are living inside the common people just like you and like I. We'll all strive to survive, and we all climb to the top over our brothers and sisters, whether we mean to or not. And we get lost in the tide of insecurities and power-seeking fooleries, but happiness don't live inside no jewelleries. In an age of distraction, we would rather tap on our iPhones than stop a war from happening. It's heartbreaking, Satan's patiently waiting for us to mess up big time, so hell on earth will be blatant. So forgive me for wanting to blow my brains out, but I've got a change of heart. It's time for change now, rearrange now, fist in the sky. I say proud, say loud, revolution word on my brain now. It's with the people, yeah, power's with the people. If the people strive for unity, the world it could be equal. You could be the start of the beginning, a dawn of no stress, no troubles, no sinning, just living. So overthrow evil and greed, put aside your distractions, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me, welcome change with me, now welcome change with me, now welcome change, welcome change, welcome change with me. Yeah, 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 yeah.
da-da-do.
Wow. He could release that today, and that would be potentially a massive hit, because let's think about what's going on in the world today. It says we'd rather touch our iPhones than to try to stop a war. I mean, how relevant is that right now? I mean, it's incredibly relevant. And man, what a great song. What a great talent. And again, the fortitude, the depth of character, and his ability to trudge forward and just make a change with me. Let's make a change. You know what? I'm all for it. I'm all for it. The world needs it. So let's get back to making sure we're loving one another. Let's be sure that we're leading with compassion, that we're leading with grace, and that we are doing what we can to come together for change. Let's go. Let's come together for change. It is time to, this mad world. Thank you, Ren, for yet another emotional roller coaster of a video. Boy, I can't wait to get to chapter 7. Here's our sign off, everybody.
Whatever. Goodbye.
Have a great day.
We better just end this one.
Everybody, have a great day. Smile and
you know
make
what?
somebody else's day a little bit brighter.
Normally I'd say that, but if you're a Steeler,
If you're a Steeler, then F off.